Good evening and welcome. My name is Jennifer Johnson-Hanks. I'm a professor of demography and sociology here at Berkeley and the executive dean of the College of Letters and Science. And it is my enormous pleasure and privilege to give you the most warm welcome to the 2026 Nimitz Lecture. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is a very important year for our country and for our institution. It is, as you know, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a document that sets liberty and equality as guiding principles for our nation. We'll be celebrating the Declaration of Independence in a whole variety of ways in the college over the coming year, starting with a festive May Day Declaration of Independence Trivia Bowl with prize money funded by the Berkeley Liberty Initiative. And then moving into the fall, we'll use the Declaration of Independence as our on-the-same-page reading, meaning that we will share it with all members of all incoming students and talk about it in a variety of our courses and places. It is also, of course, the 100th anniversary of Berkeley's own Naval ROTC, one of the original 6, founded by then Captain Chester Nimitz as its first commanding officer. The Berkeley ROTC units, all of them, have served to uplift the values of the Declaration of Independence throughout their time here in a deeply, profoundly Berkeley way. On the one hand, thinking about that tie from the Declaration of Independence through to the Bill of Rights and what it means to talk about our rights as a nation and as people, but also with a deep commitment to public service. And that notion of liberty, equality, and service feels so deeply Berkeley to me and so deeply tied to our ROTC that it's just a wonderful relationship that we have. That service is clearly shown by our 3 completely remarkable commanding officers, Captain Randy Van Rossum, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Fife, and Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Elliott. Unfortunately, all 3 of them will be leaving us this year, and I think that many of you in this room know what a great loss that will be, and I just wanted to say a brief thank you to these remarkable, remarkable men. Gentlemen, it has been such an honor to serve alongside you, and on behalf of Berkeley, I really want to thank you. Now it is my privilege and honor to get to introduce our Chancellor, Rich Lyons, the 12th Chancellor of the University of California, Berkeley. Chancellor Lyons also demonstrates what a Berkeley education can do to prepare young people for lives of consequence and lives of service. He came to Berkeley as an undergraduate business major, but fell in love with the French language and culture, and that led him in extraordinary directions onto a PhD in economics at MIT, where he has come to specialize in international economics, perhaps in part out of love for France. And then he joined the faculty at Columbia Business School before having the good sense to return to Berkeley, where he served in a variety of roles in the Haas Business School, including as its dean. He left us briefly to serve as the chief learning officer at Goldman Sachs, and then as our own innovation and entrepreneurship officer for the entirety of the campus before becoming chancellor. As a scholar, Chancellor Lyons is known for his work in international economics, especially exchange rates and cryptocurrency. And as an administrative leader, he is known for entrepreneurial thinking, innovation outside of every kind of box, and perhaps especially for his work on culture, elevating a culture at Haas and at Berkeley and on the campus as a whole that grows out of our principles of community and is aligned with our values and what we believe as a people, feels to me the most appropriate kind of framing for a chancellor who will now get to introduce the Nimitz Lecture.
Thank you for this opportunity to join you tonight as we mark and celebrate the 100th anniversary, as was said, of Berkeley's Naval Reserve Officers Training Corps program. 100 years ago, 1926, a young naval officer by the name of Chester W. Nimitz walked onto this campus and established one of the 6 original naval ROTC programs in the country. Since then, The Berkeley program, along with those other early forerunners at Harvard, at Yale, at Northwestern, at the University of Washington, and at Georgia Tech, has commissioned extraordinary naval officers who have helped to defend our nation and our democracy through some of the most consequential conflicts in history. Nimitz was a Texan by birth and a sailor by destiny, a pioneer in submarine propulsion, a builder of institutions, a strategist of rare brilliance, and an uncommon accomplishments one after another. On September 2, 1945, it was Fleet Admiral Nimitz who, as Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, accepted the Japanese surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri, bringing the Second World War to its close. Yet Nimitz was also, by all accounts, a man of uncommon humility. He famously declined to write his memoir, saying the story of the Pacific War belonged to the men and women who fought it. That selflessness is, I should note, an essential ingredient of effective leadership and an attribute worth emulating. At Berkeley, we often talk about confidence without attitude. It's entirely fitting that the Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz Memorial Lectureship has, since 1985, brought to this stage some of the most important voices in national security, leaders whose work reflects the same commitment to the security and, crucially, the values of this nation that Nimitz embodied. Today, we add another splendid chapter to that tradition. I can't imagine a more fitting voice for this moment than Berkeley's very own Professor Victoria Coleman. She had a storied and remarkable career across the highest reaches of America's national security sector, serving, for example, as the 22nd director of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, where she shaped the cutting edge of American military technology. Victoria also served our nation as the 37th chief scientist of the United States Air Force, aligning the scientific community with mission-critical needs. She has held senior roles at Intel, at Samsung, at HP, Nokia, Yahoo, the Wikimedia Foundation, and led Airbus's Silicon Valley Innovation Center. We are thrilled and honored that after more than 35 years of experience at the frontier of technology and the frontier of national security, Victoria agreed to serve as our UC Berkeley Associate Provost for the Berkeley Air and Space Center, and also as one of our professors of electrical engineering and computer sciences. She is now leading our unprecedented project at Moffett Field that is bringing together academia, industry, and government in order to build and develop an air and space innovation hub adjacent to NASA Ames. I can't wait to see the technological breakthroughs that will be launched from our new outpost in Silicon Valley. Admiral Nimitz defended our nation and our democracy by mastering the technology of his time and building the institutions to deploy it. Professor Coleman has spent her career doing the same. I cannot think of a better person to reflect on what that tradition means for the next 100 years, nor can I think of a better setting or a better audience than this one. Speaking about anniversaries, it bears mention that this year, our country turns 250 years old, as Jenna mentioned, and we have the opportunity to celebrate and advance America's ever-evolving and successful experiment in democracy, in liberty, and in the idea that free people can and should govern themselves. At Cal, we are finalizing our own plans to take advantage of this historic occasion to celebrate, some of which Jenna mentioned, and make sure the public we serve is fully aware of the indispensable role that UC Berkeley has played in the American story. And I stand before you today knowing and appreciating the extent to which our mission is advanced and supported by the members of our ROTC programs and by the service members and veterans who stand out among our alumni, students, staff, and faculty. Their dedication, your dedication to public service, to advancing and protecting the well-being and security of the American people. It enriches our community and mirrors and strengthens the values and mission of our university. And for that, you have my gratitude and my appreciation. And with that, midshipmen, cadets, distinguished guests, please join me in welcoming the 2026 Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz Memorial Lecturer, Professor Victoria Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Lyons. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have to apologize to all of you. I come from a different service, and I tried very hard to keep my jabs at the Navy to a minimum this afternoon, so I promise to be good, but you hold me accountable. Okay, so before I begin, I want to say something directly to the midshipmen and cadets in this room. You are all preparing to enter a profession where the technologies you will operate, and some of you maybe even command, are evolving faster than any time in our history. The aircraft, the systems, the capabilities that will define your careers are in many cases only just beginning to emerge today. And that makes it especially meaningful to be here with you this afternoon. Let me begin by saying what an honor it is to be here today. I am deeply grateful to Professor Mark Brilliant and the Military Officers Education Committee for the kind invitation to deliver this year's Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz Memorial Lecture. To be included here amongst you and amongst the distinguished leaders and scholars who have delivered this lecture before me is both humbling and deeply meaningful, and I have to say somewhat scary. We'll see how well I do. This year's lecture, as you already heard, is particularly special because we are marking the 100th anniversary of the Naval ROTC here at UC Berkeley, one of the original 6 Naval ROTC programs in the United States. What this means is that for a century, right here at Berkeley, along with students from partner universities across the Bay Area, you have all chosen to prepare yourselves for service as officers in the United States military, while at the same time pursuing the highest levels of academic achievement. You did not pick the easy path, but I believe you picked the correct path. And I am so proud about each one of you for choosing to go down this path. This combination that you all bring, the combination of intellectual rigor and a commitment to service, represents something uniquely powerful about the ROTC tradition. And it's also a fitting context in which to reflect on the legacy of the man whose name this lecture carries. Fleet Admiral Nimitz led the United States Navy through one of the most profound technological transformations in the history of warfare. He commanded at a time where the future of naval power was being invented in real time. And the decisions he made, as you will do in your careers, helped shape the outcome of perhaps our lifetime's most significant conflict, the Second World War. During that time, naval warfare was shifting from battleships to aircraft carriers, from line-of-sight engagements to radar and signals intelligence, and from regional operations to truly global command. Nimitz did not simply command forces during that transformation, he led through it. In many ways, that is exactly the challenge every generation of military leaders faces. Learning how to understand, trust, and integrate revolutionary technologies while the stakes could not possibly be higher. All of you will be called upon to perform exactly this delicate balance between bringing the latest and greatest technology to the mission and safeguarding the safety and integrity of that mission. And I think that's why the topic of today's lecture feels particularly timely. Over the past century, the world that Nimitz knew has changed dramatically. Warfare has moved from the age of steel and steam to the age of software, autonomy, and, dare I say it, artificial intelligence. The tools of national security increasingly involve algorithms, data, and machines capable of learning and decision-making. And this is why I, as a computer scientist, stand in front of you here talking about these topics. A lot of change. Yet, despite of all that change, some things remain remarkably constant. Leadership matters. Adaptation matters. And the ability to responsibly integrate new technology into the conduct of war remains one of the defining challenges for every generation of military professionals. For me, this topic is also deeply personal. I've spent much of my career working on the intersection of advanced technology and national security, first as a computer scientist, later in industry, as the director of DARPA, and for several years serving as the chief scientist of the United States Air Force. In that role, I had the privilege, and I mean that, it was a true privilege, of working closely with the men and women who operate some of the world's most advanced aircraft. One thing becomes clear when you spend time with aviators. Technology may shape the battlefield, but it is ultimately people, pilots, operators, engineers, and leaders, dare I say it, sailors, who determine how that technology is used. The relationship between humans and machines in aviation has always been a partnership. Each generation of aircraft introduces new levels of automation, new sensors, and new decision support tools. But the goal has never been to replace the human. The goal has always been to extend human capability. That lesson has stayed with me throughout my career. And it is one of the reasons I find it especially meaningful to be speaking here today, not only at one of the world's great universities, but in front of students like yourselves who are preparing to serve as officers in the United States military. Because the young men and women in ROTC programs today will lead forces that operate technologies that in many cases do not yet fully exist. What are some of these technologies? Autonomous aircraft, AI-enabled command systems, human-machine teams operating across airspace, cyber, and beyond. You all will inherit a world where technological change is faster, more distributed, and more global than at any point in history. But that challenge is not entirely new. In fact, we have seen something very similar before. And one of the best places to understand it is in the history of aviation. So that raises a very interesting question. What actually happens when a revolutionary technology enters military aviation? How long does it take before it becomes trusted? How do humans learn to operate alongside it? And how do institutions adapt, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, to entirely new capabilities? The history of aviation is in many ways the history of humans learning how to trust increasingly intelligent machines. And if we look carefully at that history, from the earliest autopilots to fly-by-wire aircraft to today's AI-enabled systems, we start to see a pattern that can teach us a great deal about where AI in defense may be heading next. So let's start with a simple observation. The AI revolution that we're all experiencing today, here we're actually at the birthplace of that revolution, is not the first time aviation has faced something like this. So what I wanted to do today is to tell you this story of change through the lens of some of the aircraft that I have worked on during my career. Let's see, now we will test my intelligence. Wow, look at this, great. So let's start from the F-14 Tomcat. And yes, I'm that old, and I thought I would start with a naval platform. And I have to say it's one of the best. It's the F-14 Tomcat, as well as being probably the world's most gorgeous airplane. Saw service in the first Gulf War. I remember watching the sorties, and it was incredible, like how quickly we established air dominance through the deployments of the F-14. I was so proud watching the airplane that I had worked on take flight and bring that mission to an end as conclusively as it did. One of the most distinctive features of this aircraft is its variable geometry wings. The wings sweep forward for lift during takeoff and landing, and sweep backward for high-speed flight and storage on the aircraft carrier deck. Managing that continuously during flight would be impossible for a human pilot to do manually. Instead, the aircraft uses the air data computer, the ADC. That's the system I worked on. The ADC continuously processes airspeed, altitude, and aerodynamic conditions and automatically adjusts the wing sweep. The aircraft is essentially computing how it should configure itself in real time. When I worked on this system, at that time, systems like this were perceived and perhaps described often as a form of machine intelligence. Today, we simply call them what? Flight control systems. The technology has been absorbed into the fabric and has disappeared, which is when you know that the technology is truly successful. The principle was already there, however. Machines helping humans manage complex dynamic systems faster than humans alone could. And here's another example. The next step came with autopilots. Autopilots dramatically reduced pilot workload by stabilizing the aircraft and managing navigation. But then something very subtle actually happened when autopilots were introduced, and that was that for the first time, aircraft began operating as true human-machine partnerships. The pilot remained in command, but the machine continuously assisted. In hindsight, pilots represent one of the earliest real-world examples of human-AI teaming. Now let's talk about my next favorite aircraft after the F-14, and that's the F-16. And I'm going to talk to you about that because that is the airplane where the next major leap came, which was fly-by-wire flight control systems. Traditional aircraft used mechanical cables and hydraulics to control flight surfaces. They were not the easiest things to fly. Fly-by-wire replaced those with computers. The pilot stick inputs became digital signals. So in the F-16, you have the stick on the side, and are interpreted by the flight control computers. What's even more interesting is that, so the F-16 truly loves to fly. It's the world's easiest airplane to fly. Why is that? Matter of fact, that airplane was designed to be aerodynamically unstable. Why? Because that gave you incredible maneuverability and therefore allowed you to perform a set of missions that would not be possible with an aerodynamically stable aircraft. But here's the trick. A pilot cannot fly it without fly-by-wire. In order to be able to fly it, you need constant computer stabilization of the airplane. So the flight control computer is actually continually adjusting the aircraft hundreds of times per second. The pilot is flying, but the computer is always there, stabilizing, interpreting, and refining. So what once seemed radical has now become standard engineering. Again, technology disappearing. And let me tell you about the technology that actually is near and dear to my heart that follows this trajectory. And this actually emerged decades later. In the F-16 fleet now we have a system called AutoGCAS, the Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System. And what this system does is it continuously monitors the aircraft's trajectory relative to the terrain. You will have heard about TCAS, for example, which is what civilian airliners use to make sure to maintain separation. GCAS maintains separation between the aircraft and the terrain. If AutoGCAS determines that the aircraft is in a trajectory that will result in a conjunction, and the pilot does not react, the system automatically takes control and recovers the aircraft. Since its introduction in the US Air Force F-16 fleet, AutoGCAS has saved multiple pilots and aircraft. But like many forms of automation, it took time for pilots to trust it. But today, no F-16 pilot would willingly fly without it. And there's a very good reason why. Flying high-performance fighters, as I discovered when I had the privilege of flying in them in the Air Force, can be disorienting in ways that are hard to describe unless you have experienced it. As I say to people sometimes, when you're pulling 5 Gs upside down in the dark, disorientation is king. Switches are impossible to see. You're fighting to kill the enemy and stay alive. You're flying blind in the dark vortex. GCAS at least gives you a seatbelt. That's what good automation does. It doesn't replace the human. It helps keep the human alive. And now I want to share with you something that I will come back to and is deeply meaningful to me personally. One of the most powerful ways to understand the importance of systems like AutoGCAS is to ask a simple question, and that is, what happens when they are not there? AutoGCAS now feels like a natural part of modern fighter aviation. Pilots trust it. But not every aircraft in the fleet has access to these systems. And sometimes the difference between having that technology and not having it is measured in lives. In August 2014, the Air Force lost an extraordinary fighter pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Moose Fontenot of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Moose was the kind of pilot that every squadron hopes to have. He was a graduate of the US Air Force Weapons School, our version of Top Gun, a decorated combat aviator, and by all accounts, an exceptional leader and mentor. He had flown numerous combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan and was deeply respected throughout the fighter community. On August 27, 2014, while flying an F-15C on a maintenance mission, Moose's aircraft impacted the mountains of West Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. Later, and I apologize, I'm going to get emotional about this. Later, investigators determined that he likely became incapacitated during the flight. Moose had a little bit of a head cold the night before, so he took himself off the flight schedule. And he got up the next day, and he felt better, and he put himself back on the flight schedule. And you know what happens when you fly that altitude and your fighter canopy seals don't work so well. There's not enough oxygen. So he became incapacitated during the flight. His aircraft struck the ground at approximately 0.85 Mach. I don't need to tell you that there was no recovery. Now just imagine that if that F-15C had AutoGCAS installed. The system would have detected the impending ground collision, it would have taken control of the aircraft, and it would have automatically executed a recovery maneuver. In many cases, this recovery will occur in a matter of seconds, faster than any human pilot could react, especially if the pilot is disoriented or incapacitated. G-lock is a real thing. In other words, technology that once sounded experimental, even controversial, now saves lives. Moose's loss is a powerful reminder of something important. Innovation in aviation isn't just about performance, it's about survivability. And history shows that once these systems prove themselves, they move quickly from experimental AI to why would anyone fly without it? So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about another chapter in my career, civil aviation. Around the same time that military aviation was pushing information forward, automation forward, commercial aviation was undergoing its own revolution. In the late 1980s, Airbus made a momentous and bold decision. They introduced fly-by-wire in the A320, their most important commercial aircraft program. This was a major technological gamble. Passengers, not fighter pilots, passengers like you and me, for the first time were entrusting their lives to aircraft controlled by computers. But Airbus believed the safety and performance benefits were overwhelming, and history shows that they were right. The A320 family became one of the most successful aircraft programs in aviation history, and thousands of aircraft are delivered worldwide. The fleet today is approximately 12,000 aircraft flying every day. What once seemed radical became the global standard. Years later, when I was leading A-Cubed, Airbus Silicon Valley Innovation Center, we worked on technologies pushing automation even further. One such example is the Visual Landing System, VLS, for the next generation of Airbus single-aisle aircraft, which is the workhorse of the company. It still is the workhorse of the company. So VLS uses computer vision and machine learning to recognize the runway environment and assist the aircraft during landing, even at airports that lack ILS infrastructure, instrument landing system infrastructure. VLS allows the aircraft to interpret visual cues the way a human pilot would, and if connected to the flight management system, it is able to land the aircraft autonomously if the pilot, for whatever reason, is incapacitated. Systems like this are part of a broader move towards something called gate-to-gate autonomy. Taxiing, takeoff, ascent, cruise, descent, landing, and taxiing to the arrival gate, all autonomously executed by the aircraft. That future is not very far. But systems like VLS, again, are not replacing pilots. What they are doing is they are dramatically expanding what aircraft systems can actually do. This pattern repeats itself again and again in aviation. Capabilities that start as experimental, they become part of the standard architecture of flight. Which brings me to the next frontier, where AI is no longer confined to the cockpit or even the aircraft, but begins to connect entire formations of aircraft into coordinated systems. Programs like the DARPA Alpha Dogfight trials showed that machine learning systems could learn air combat tactics and compete effectively against human pilots in simulation. But simulation was only the beginning. The X-62A Vista that you see up there, the tail number 048, is an experimental F-16 variant. It became the first platform for autonomous air combat experimentation. For the first time, AI agents were not just assisting pilots, they were flying the aircraft and making tactical decisions. Through programs like Venom, those algorithms began transitioning into real aircraft and real missions. So what you see on the left side is one of the 6 aircraft that we created in the Air Force as part of a half squadron at Eglin Air Force Base. They're flying AI labs. Algorithms that are being developed by DARPA and other researchers, including here at Berkeley, they get dropped into these airplanes, and pilots fly them to see how the AI behaves. This is how you begin to move from an experimental platform like the Vista into the main core of the force that the Air Force presents. The F-16 is by far the most populous airplane that the US Air Force possesses. These efforts really show that machine learning systems can adapt to environments as complex and dynamic as air combat. But the next phase of aviation moves even further down this path. Future air combat will not center on a single aircraft. Instead, it will rely on distributed systems of systems, crewed aircraft, collaborative combat drones, distributed sensors, electronic warfare platforms. In this emerging next-generation air dominance architecture, sometimes called the NGAD, this is the concept that is now being produced and will be delivered in the F-47, the latest Air Force fighter. The crewed aircraft acts as the mission commander. Around it operate the CCAs, the collaborative combat aircraft. These are autonomous platforms that extend sensing, strike, and electronic warfare capabilities. Coordinating such a distributed system would be impossible through manual control alone. And this is where AI now becomes the glue of the system. AI coordinates behaviors across platforms. It fuses sensor data across the network. It allocates tasks dynamically. It adapts to rapidly changing mission requirements. The aircraft is no longer the center of capability. The network is. And if you step back and look across the arc we just walked through, from the F-14 air data computer to autopilot to fly-by-wire, something remarkable becomes clear. AI did not arrive all at once. It evolved gradually, step by step. Each generation of aviation integrated more machine intelligence than the last, and over time, capabilities that once seemed extraordinary became simply part of how aircraft are built today. And I want to show you some more pretty pictures. This is what the NGAD will look like when it's built by Boeing, as the F-47. These are what the CCA early platforms look like. They will be working in tandem. Truly, our missions will now be executed not by platforms, but by a system of systems. So, looking around this evolution, something very fascinating, I think, becomes clear. Many things that once seemed like AI are now simply part of aircraft design. All the way from the ADC in the F-14 to autopilot systems, fly-by-wire, ground collision avoidance. Each one was at one point revolutionary. Each was debated, each required trust, each eventually became standard engineering. And that frontier keeps moving. Today, that frontier lies in autonomy, in distributed systems, as well as human-machine teaming at scale. The future of aviation will not simply be smarter airplanes. It will be teams of humans and machines operating together across networks of intelligent systems. But if there is another lesson here, and one that has nothing to do with algorithms or avionics. And I bored you enough with those already this afternoon. When I served as the chief scientist of the Admiral of the Air Force, I used to take my colleague, senior scientists and engineers from across the service, many of them brilliant researchers, to visit a place that sits high in the mountains above Colorado Springs. The United States Air Force Academy. and the United States Air Force Cemetery. That cemetery is the final resting place of many Air Force heroes. Among them is Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Moose Fontenot. Standing there in the thin mountain air, looking over the Rockies, I would tell them something very simple. Our job as scientists and engineers is to make sure that there are no more mooses. We ask extraordinary things of the men and women who fly our aircraft. We ask them to strap themselves into machines that move faster than sound. We ask them to operate in darkness, in combat, under enormous physical stress. We ask them to put their lives on the line so that the rest of us can enjoy freedom and live a careless life, a carefree life. So the least we can do as scientists and engineers is to dedicate our own lives to making sure that they come home. Every algorithm, every avionics system, every safety feature, every new capability, all of them ultimately serves the same purpose, so that when those pilots, like Moose, launch into the night, they come home to their families. That, in the end, is what this work, my work, is really about. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Midshipman 3C Tian at the Navy ROTC unit, and I'm a Navy option. So I have a question regarding civilian aircraft. What do you think AI could be used to enhance the civilian aircraft experience for passengers and pilots alike? What do you think are some possible breakthroughs with AI?
So, I talked a little bit about, the vision of gate-to-gate autonomy. So I think that clearly benefits our pilots in terms of workload. But crucially, it adds to the safety envelope that these pilots and the passengers that they fly operate within. There are many other kind of ingredients that make AI and autonomy a highly desirable capability. To mention one, direct ascent and descent operations. We know that if we're able to fly in and out of airports with a much kind of smaller time interval, that, first of all, increases capacity. And aviation, civil aviation, the numbers of passengers that fly in the next 10 years will double. What will not double is the real estate over which these airplanes will have to. So the only way to do it is to increase capacity. So AI helps you with that, but it also helps you with the ability to fly close to each other, which, again, a human being could not possibly execute. So it enables, in civil aviation, both capacity that allows us to serve more people, but also to do so more safely. So the system that I talked about, the VLS, the Visual Landing System, you can connect the system to the flight management control. And if for whatever reason the pilot is incapable of landing the aircraft, it will land the aircraft for you. Today, that's not possible. If you happen to be flying into an airport that has a Category 3 ILS system, maybe the autopilot can land it. If you fly into an airfield that doesn't have that, you're out of luck. So you all heard in the movies, can anybody fly this aircraft? That would not happen if VLS was installed and connected to the flight management control system.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, Dr. Coleman. I'm Lieutenant Greenbaum. I'm one of the instructors here. We live in a city where it seems like everybody has access to some of the most cutting edge and powerful AI tools. But I hopped off my aircraft carrier in November, and we, as warfighters, did not. So where's the disconnect? How do you think we can rectify that disconnect? And how does recent news like the Anthropic and Trump administration feud impact the dissemination of these AI tools to the warfighter? Thanks.
So it's in many ways ironic because you're right. Technologies advance, at rapid rates, and our ability to absorb them into capabilities for the warfighter is often lagging. And it is ironic because things like fly-by-wire was completely a military capability that eventually found its way inside of civil aviation. I think what's happening is technology is now changing at such a rapid pace that our acquisition and force design capabilities have not kept up to that speed. And I think that is the challenge that all of us in the national security kind of technology area are trying to solve for. So you will have heard Secretary of War Pete Hegseth being on a national freedom tour. Acquisition reform is something that the Trump administration, the second Trump administration is truly taking to heart because they understand that there's this mismatch of our ability to absorb technologies that just seemingly everybody else can absorb faster than we can. I think it's a significant challenge for us, but I believe there's hope. And I will tell you, I believe that we here at Berkeley and at the Berkeley Air and Space Center can make a difference. And I would welcome, by the way, anybody who's interested in learning more to come and find me and Leah Walker in the audience to tell you more about that. But the ability to rapidly, well, first of all, identify real mission requirements versus imaginary ones, which is what sometimes our colleagues in the labs do, and then rapidly translate them into capabilities in the hands of the warfighter is something that we are taking on here at Berkeley. So if you ask me 5 years from now, I hope to have a better answer for you, and it will be, a kind of a good assessment, of our ability to execute our vision or otherwise. But it's absolutely true. I will tell you, my son, my youngest son, he lost his mind, and instead of coming to the Air Force, he decided to join the Army. We have conversations about this in our household. He is deployed right now in Europe. Do you know how he keeps in touch with us? With his own Starlink terminal. This is how our service members keep in touch and communicate, which is quite shocking if you think about it. So, I hope to have better news for you next time we speak.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Midshipman Second Class Tomov from Cal Maritime, Marine Transportation. So my question kind of piggybacks off the last question. It's kind of with your experience as director of DARPA and kind of just your experience overall with research and development in the military and in the civilian industry, how can we best, especially with the failure of kind of the Constellation class and how long that took and how many delays we had with that program, how can we improve our technological improvements to our vessels or into our military equipment and speed up the process so that we can get out equipment on a much faster scale?
Again, it's a great question, and it's something that I personally deeply care about. Right? So I told you the story of Moose, and the fact that that airplane had leaking seals is the stupidest way to die. It's the stupidest way to die, right? So I have. This is why I come to work every day, to make sure that that is far less likely than it is today. How do we do it? So I'll tell you what is Victoria Coleman's theory of change. One is to truly understand what it is that is needed. So, when you deploy in an aircraft carrier, in a frigate, and whatever it is, understand deeply and in detail, not in abstraction, in detail, what are the missions that you will be called upon to perform. Will it be, for example, to form a blockade? Maybe. Would it be to break the blockade? What is it that you will be doing? Figure out what those needs are, take those missions, and Lord knows we have tools, we have processes to take those missions and analyze them so that we know what capabilities are needed. And once you know that, you know what you have today and you know what the gap is. So now, this is gold. You know what the requirement is. But if that's all you do, if you know the requirement and you don't do anything about it, at the end of the day, nothing changes. So you need to take the next step, and that is to work with the services who organize, train, and equip to take those technologies and use them to design force structure so that we know how many F-16s do we need and how many F-47s we need and how many frigates do we need. And decide how many sailors we need and how many soldiers and airmen do we need. And then take the gap and go to acquisition that will talk to defense contractors, large and small, that will talk to the defense research enterprise, AFRL, ARL, NRL. We'll talk to universities like ours to try and figure out how to bridge that gap. So that's great. So now you have universities and others engaged. Now what? We've already have universities engaged and the defense sector and the small companies. We still take years, decades to bring technology to the warfighter that could be in their hands much sooner. What's missing? You know what's missing? And again, this is my thesis. What's missing is the know-how for how to develop capabilities rapidly, Silicon Valley style. One of the things that I tell people when they ask me, what's this Berkeley Air and Space Center about? I tell them, I want it to be the destination of choice for people who want to work in new space tech that is driven by a software-first strategy that in many ways takes no prisoners, that builds and experiments daily, because this is how you make progress. And then what you do is you bring together the people in the labs that are responsible for the acquisition, the people in uniform that will be using these capabilities, because unless they're in the room, I don't care whether the capability is the next, the next Nobel Prize, winning technology. It has to be relevant to somebody in uniform. You bring together the researchers from universities like ours. You bring together companies large and small, and they work shoulder to shoulder to develop these things. Then something magic happens when you do that. All this trying to tell the world inside the DoD how the rest of the universe develops software and systems, that disappears. I can tell you, I got a bloody nose more than once inside the Department of the Air Force when I had these conversations with colleagues and senior leaders that were very dedicated to the mission. Very senior people, some of them very technical people, but none of them with experience for how Silicon Valley solves these problems. I know I was right. I know I was right. What we will do here at the Berkeley Air and Space Center is demonstrate that. We will pick certain capability portfolios, and we will build them together in this manner. And what we will do is not to deliver them faster than ever thought possible. We will be educating both the officers who have to execute them the last mile. So in the Air Force, we talk about something called technology maneuver. Those of you, none of you are in the Army, but the Army has this concept of maneuver. In the Air Force, we developed this concept of technology maneuver. The last mile of how the technology will be used needs to be determined and adapted by the officers that will be using it. Right? So we need to get that piece straight, but also we need to get our scientists and engineers inside of the labs to know how the rest of the universe develops software today. And for a long time, Congress, for example, has tried to give special authorities to the labs to facilitate people leaving, going in industry, learning, and going back. It never works. It never works. This way, they come to us for a year, they learn, they go back. We change the system from the inside. That's my vision. Again, hold me accountable.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Cadet Smart Stewart from Army ROTC. How, in your experience, have you seen a technology become standard? What are the factors, metrics that make it a benchmark? And how is this being applied to this accelerated technological timeline that we're seeing now?
It's a great question, and maybe I can refer you back to my auto GCAS example. There were many pilots that were very skittish because auto GCAS creates a flight safety envelope. And most people were like, I'm going to be able to fly my airplane. So there was a lot of resistance in the pilot community embracing that until the first lives that it saved. And I can tell you now, nobody will fly in an F-16 without it. I think that's the way you do it. It's an ongoing process. And a lot of these technologies come with dilemmas that are not technological. Sometimes they are policy related. And that's to give you another example. When I learned about Moose, and I learned about Moose in Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, I sent out a detachment of young technical officers to go spend a month there to find out what on earth went on, and to come back and tell me what solutions did we possibly have. So off they went. They worked with the operators. They worked with the crew chiefs. They came back and they said, ma'am, there is a technology. It's a behind-the-ear oxygen saturation sensor that is very, very accurate, like 99% accurate. It alarms when a person is about to become hypoxic. Why is that important? Moose was a very experienced pilot. He had 2,300 hours, flying hours, 240 of them combat hours. He had no time to recover from hypoxia. Hypoxia sets in about 5 seconds. If he knew he was getting hypoxia, there were things he could have done. There is, you can gun up the oxygen to 100%. You have an auxiliary oxygen bottle. If he had that sensor inside of his helmet, he could have come home that night. I can't tell you how personally I took that. I kept, and I still do this, I will not give up until every combat Air Force pilot has this in their helmet. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with leadership that was like, there are always other priorities. There are always other priorities. Of course there are. You know how much it would cost for every pilot in the CAF to have this sensor, this life-saving sensor? $30 million. Do you know what the budget of the DoD is going to be? $1.5 trillion with a T. So the first thing that you have to do is fight this bureaucracy, this inertia that says, hey, the units can buy it. No, they can't. They don't have the money. So you have the money, you buy it. But then it's the pilot acceptance. So we talked about auto GCAS and how pilots were reluctant to give up their degrees of freedom, even though it meant that it saved their lives. It's a little bit like seatbelts, right? In New Hampshire, people still don't wear seatbelts. Well, that's their choice, I guess. This particular device sits inside of the air cup. So the helmet has two air cups. You remove the ones that are, built in with the helmet, and you put this thing on. The way it works is that it sends the data it collects to a server, and that server then brings it to a mobile phone, and the pilot can look at it and decide, in fact, you can decide how your performance is affected. So when you pull in 4, 5, 6 Gs, you can see what happens to your heart rate, to your oxygen saturation, and so on. Many pilots were concerned that if this data becomes visible to their leadership, they would stop them from flying. So we had to have lots of discussions with leadership and with policymakers and the pilots about how we should go about introducing this life-saving technology. You would think it's a no-brainer, and to me it is a no-brainer. But to the flying community, within that culture, within that operating environment, it was far from that. And there are options. So you can have an option, for example, where you just operate the device, and all it does is it screams in your ear when you become hypoxic. You don't have to record it anyplace. If you want to collect your own data, you can do it. We can write policy that says that data never leaves your personal device. It is life-saving technology that today, because of inertia and because of minor policy hurdles, we've not been able to overcome, and people still fly F-15s with leaky seals. In fact, if I had to guess, and I don't have to guess, we have roughly once a week, we experience a hypoxic incident in the fleet, in the United States Air Force. In the year of our Lord 2026, it's completely not unacceptable, right? I think the message that I'd like you to get from that is none of these things are easy. Actually, the technology part, I gotta tell you, that's by far the easiest part. It's, that's like 10%. 90% is figuring out how you're gonna put it in the system in such a way that it's accepted, embraced, and becomes the standard. It's not simple, but you know what? Just like I don't take no for an answer, just don't take no for an answer. Every time I go to the academy, I go and visit Moose, and I go tell him what progress, if any, I have made. I hold myself accountable to him and his brethren in this mission that they perform. So take it personally. It's about you, it's about your comrades in uniform. Take it personally, don't give up.
Hi, Professor Coleman. I'm Mark Brilliant. As a professor of history, I took great pleasure in the way you used history in your talk today. There's lots of continuity in the history that you invoked, and yet, if I wasn't mistaken, there is some rupture when you get to that last set of innovations that the humans seem to disappear from the platforms. And my question has to do, it's really a question, it's a two-part question about costs. I'm just generally curious about the cost of these new platforms relative to the platforms they're replacing.
Yeah.
But the other question about cost is one that has to do with the human element. You remove the humans from the platforms, Moose is totally protected, and other people like him, right? But how do you think through the implications for waging war through the air when there aren't humans involved in that process in the air? I mean, they're fighting it on the ground, but and how do you discuss that and what the implications are? Does it become, easier to do and therefore more likely to do? How have you had those conversations about cost?
Goodness, do we have these conversations? We absolutely do, and these conversations are, with every turn of technology change, they continue, and then in some ways they become more intense. Somebody asked earlier about Anthropic and its use and so on. I will tell you that every single colleague that I worked with in the Department of War is completely and utterly dedicated to observing the law of war. And nobody wants to go to jail for breaking that law. As far as I know, and I know a lot about this, there are no plans to execute any missions autonomously without a human in the loop. So today, we fly MQ-9 Reapers. There's somebody in a base somewhere that flies that drone. It's not doing stuff by itself. In what I showed you, a few slides up with the F-47 and the CCAs, the F-47 is a crewed aircraft. So today, if you fly a sortie with the F-16s, there are 4 jets to the group. There's the leader and there are the wingmen. What we are proposing, what is happening with the NGAD and the F-47 is that the wingmen become drones. So the crewed platform is still in control of both the drones and the execution of the operation. There's always a human in the loop. Because, for humans, we know there is a law of war. For machines, there's no such law. So I don't believe there is anybody in the Department of War, anybody, that believes that we can or should unleash autonomy on anybody for any reason without a human in the loop. Again, there was a question about Claude and Anthropic. And I don't own stock either in Anthropic or OpenAI. I guess nobody does. The position of the Department of War is that AI should be used for all lawful purposes. Lawful purposes. In other words, it's not the job of the military to decide what constitutes a lawful purpose or not. It's the job of all of us, as society, as Americans, as voters, to decide what that line is. Our military simply executes within those sets of definitions. So we ask them to do incredible things. Let's not ask them to also be the legislators. That's not what our military is for. I will tell you, my colleague, general officers, people that have served as fighter pilots, you watch them walk, and they're all small people. They all have trouble walking. People that fly these things, they get shorter every year that they fly them because the spines compress because of the G's that they pull. Certainly, if you have to eject, that's probably a one and done because of the damage you sustain. These are not people that take their job unseriously. These are people that are exquisitely trained, as all of you are and will be, to observe the guidelines that we, as a nation, have set up for them to perform with them. So all lawful uses of AI, no unlawful uses of AI. It's up to us to determine what that is.
Ma'am, thank you for joining us this evening. Captain Manuzak with Army ROTC. My question kind of shifts the focus a little bit more you mentioned in your slides, Indo-PACOM, and it's no real secret that China's kind of our near-peer adversary. As they close the technology gap and both nations integrate AI into systems, do you foresee a convergent or divergent use of AI in systems? And if it is a convergent use of AI in systems, how do we as a force maintain our edge over our near-peer adversaries?
It's a great question, and it's always nice to have a pacing adversary, and sometimes I'm grateful to the great country of China for providing such a thing, because it keeps us fresh and on our toes. I honestly don't think this is a technology question. I think the United States has an unquestionable lead on technology. China is very good as well. But if this was simply a technology competition, I would be sleeping easily at night. It's not about technology, it's about alignment. It's not about outpacing the pace at which they produce AI solutions, or even the pace at which they integrate them. It's about outpacing them in aligning between the missions that we have to fight and the systems that we build and deploy. And that is an incredibly difficult challenge for us. So if I were to look at us and do a SWOT of where it is that our vulnerability lies, it is in our inability to quickly and timely align across the national security enterprise. We have arguably, because our military is so large, we have arguably the most complex organizational structure that has evolved over years, and Admiral Nimitz was part of that transformation. You have the combatant commands that are in charge of the missions. They have practically no say in what the services buy. No say. So when one day they get called upon to go execute, they have to hope that they have the right capabilities that somebody 10, 20 years ago figured out maybe we needed, And they happen to be the right thing for the mission they need to execute. I gotta tell you, that's no way to work. If you are a company, I mean, many of you here, probably will have internships. Maybe some of you will go on to build products in companies in the Valley. There is no company that would ever succeed by stockpiling components and putting them in a warehouse somewhere that they didn't know that they were going to need to use to build a product. So when I used to build mobile phones, back in the day, we were exquisite at planning our supply chain and understanding what our customers in each region, in each time of the year, with each operator, with each technology needed. And we bought exactly what we needed to deliver that product on time so that you could get inside of the telco's test lab in time for Christmas or whatever, right? We know how to do this. This is not how the DoD operates today. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. It is for this reason that I want us to build this capability of building things together here in the Valley, because that's when they begin to learn what it takes to align real mission need with capability development and rapid capability development at that. Okay, final, please, join me in a round of applause. Thank you.